Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. Today on the podcast, I want to bring you a really interesting conversation I had today on my podcast, AI Applied, which I host with Connor Grennan. We interviewed Logan Kilpatrick, who is from OpenAI and is in charge of developer relations over there. He is a phenomenal guest. So today on the podcast, I wanted to give you a snippet of that and give you a couple of the highlights from our conversation with him today. He's breaking down everything that happened over OpenAI's Developer Day, talking about their GPT store, talking about autonomous agents, so many interesting things. Nuclear fission, which is going to be needed for ChatGPT 8, all sorts of crazy topics. I'm going to give you a snippet of that today on the podcast. But if you want to listen to the entire interview, you can head on over to AI Applied. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the full episode. But I'm going to give you a brief highlight reel on the podcast today because I think this is an amazing episode. So stick around and let's get into it. Joining us today on AI Applied is Logan Kilpatrick, who's OpenAI's first developer advocate and DevRel hire. He's been building the developer relations function from the ground up. He's a big supporter of open source communities, from NumFocus to the Julia language, with a rich background in machine learning from his time at Apple. Logan brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in pushing the boundaries of AI and developer relations. Super excited to have you on the show. Welcome, Logan.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Super excited to have you on the show. What I would love to kind of kick this off with is asking you if you could share a little bit about your journey, what kind of led you to, joining OpenAI, becoming one of their first developer advocates, and, what was really your vision for developer relations at OpenAI? You're starting this, kind of building it from the ground up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I joined OpenAI about a year ago. I started interviewing before ChatGPT and all that good stuff. But had just actually moved from San Francisco to Chicago, and they were looking for somebody in San Francisco. And I, of course, wasn't there. And the team ended up reaching back out again and was willing to understand remotely at that point. So joined back in December, and it's just been a crazy roller coaster. When I was originally joining, the real problem was, hey, we have this technology, GPT 3.5, it's available in our API. We need to actually raise awareness with developers. People don't know what large language models are. People don't know what's possible with this technology. So that was the original pitch is, hey, sort of come do traditional developer advocacy, like go talk to developers, go make a bunch of content, like help people understand how to use this technology. And then fast forward to ChatGPT being released, my first day, ChatGPT hits 1 million users. And we no longer really have this problem of raising technical awareness with developers. So really, it's been a lot focused in the last 9 months around how can we actually make our core product, our API and ChatGPT in some cases as well, better for developers? How do we make it so that they're getting what they need from us and we're listening to them and all that good stuff? So it's been a ton of fun. We've also been fortunate enough to the team has grown significantly. So now there's like a lot of other people who are helping make this happen, from our API experience team to a bunch of folks in the market team. So it's been a crazy journey for the last year.
Can I just ask, Logan? So first of all, good to see you, and this must be a super crazy week for you. So thanks for making the time with us. But what did you know about OpenAI? Because I'll say that there's a lot of areas we want to cover here. Definitely want to get into the huge Dev Day, all that, and all the new stuff that's come out, and sort of super fun toys and everything else. But just kind of hovering here for a second, what did you know about because OpenAI, at least to me, that was not on the radar. It's still a fairly small company at this point. I met Emily business school, so I know a ton of people who've worked at the big Googles and Metas and Apples and everything else. But OpenAI, it was of course it came out of nowhere with this new technology. But what did you know about it? And then what was your impression walking in? What drove you to that place? Because I think to the outside world, it's small enough that a lot of people don't know people from there, so they can't sort of get a firsthand experience of oh, this is what it's like to work there.
Yeah, it's a good question. While I was interviewing at OpenAI, I was also interviewing to join sort of the opposite company, which is IBM, to lead open source science. I was going to be like the global head of technical lead for open source science or something like that. So something like completely different, honestly, from what I'm doing today, but it was an area that I was really excited about. And in hindsight, I was sitting there and I was like, this isn't like a super clear cut decision. Like, I'm like, I think OpenAI was like super cool at the time. And I was like, this is really interesting. And I really care about AI. But it wasn't like abundantly clear that this was like the resounding correct decision to make. I think it became clear in the next like 6 to 12 months that was true, but at the time it wasn't true. And I think the thing that really got me excited was GPT-4 had yet to be publicly released, so everyone was kind of like talking about this thing that they had internally that was sort of blowing their minds, and like it was, what they had externally was like nowhere near as capable as the internal versions. And everyone kept being like, yeah, we know, we're so excited to show you this once you eventually join. And as somebody who was interviewing to do developer relations, I spent a bunch of time playing around with the API, and I was super impressed by what it was able to do. And I was like, well, if this is like the baby version, then there's something even more powerful coming in the pipeline. Like, it's going to be incredible. And also just like the people who I got to meet during the interview process, it was like very clear that there was an incredible amount of smart people. And I think like if you take a step back, like that is OpenAI's differentiator against competition, as like we have so many smart people who are really just I think one of the other differentiators is just there's so much agency. Like, people come to OpenAI and like just go and do the work that needs to happen. And I think that shows in a lot of what we've released in the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's obviously why it feels like OpenAI is just leaps and bounds ahead of everyone. Like, this week, for example, everyone's like, it was like trending on Twitter, where is Google? Because everyone's like, oh my gosh, everything OpenAI is like launching, like, what's happening to Google. But something I would love to ask you about before we go to that real quick is, when you were looking, like let's say when you're getting ready to start working at OpenAI and you were looking at that API, for example, what did that look like? And then also, like, talk to me about the other players in the space, because I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, ChatGPT came and now everyone knows how to use this tool and everyone's like all over it and stuff. But like, I even remember for me, before ChatGPT, I was using tools like, Jasper last summer, and I was like blown away, and it was just DaVinci, the DaVinci 3 or whatever. What version were you looking at? And then also, if that version existed, as a developer were playing with it, why, in your opinion, were the other big players who now are scrambling, like Google and others, why were they not developing similar technology? Like, this has been in the works for a while. What do you think was the holdup?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I was also a customer of Jasper before I joined OpenAI. So I think that was like, as I got exposed to OpenAI during the interview process, I was using it to like help me do technical writing and like developer relations blogs, like technical blogs and stuff. And I was super impressed by what they had. And I think Jasper was really the first customer, at least from my external perspective, who was using large language models and like actually giving people value from it. My guess is like the rationale for large companies not having, not reacting quick enough is just like, there was really not a lot of traction with this technology. Or like, if you look at like the orders of magnitude of like revenue and users and stuff like that, it's like a drop in the drop of a bucket for a large company. So it's like, why, someone makes, some small amount of money with this thing, we don't really care. There's people making small amount of money with like tons of different technology. You can make that argument for like any new thing. And yeah, I just don't think that it was worth Google or any of these other companies' time. And now I think they've sort of seen this technology works, and there's consumers have validated that it's like a business that they're interested in paying money for and things like that. So now it makes a little bit more sense for them to make the investment. And to be honest, I think the whole narrative about Google being asleep at the wheel is, I think it's slightly blown out of proportion. Like, at the end of the day, like, Google has a bunch of incredible talent. They have a bunch of important leadership in the AI space. Like, they have a great research organization. Like, they're going to make a bunch of amazing products and services for their customers. I think they'll end up being in the place that everybody would expect Google to be. I think the real question is like, is there enough space for all of these companies to be successful? I guess is yes. I don't think for Google to be successful, it means that OpenAI can't be successful. And the same is true in reverse.
Well, so let me ask you on that, because I do want to get into like all the dev day stuff, because I know people should be like, what was your thought on that? Because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But like, just saying that it's a funny, like in any competition, in any culture, in any company, anything like that, like you're either sort of seen as the front runner or not, right? And like Google and Apple and those kind of companies in the world, even Meta, like typically are the ones way, way, way out in front. Like not even sort of, it's almost like not even a second place. And usually in startups, and Jaden has, so has done some phenomenal startups as well. And I'm in the business school, like usually like what you see, the culture in a company like an OpenAI, for example, would be like, all right, here we go. Google's the big guy. Here we go. And it like creates this incredible culture of like a chase and everything like that. You guys kind of came out of the box, and everybody else felt like they were sort of still getting their running shoes on a little bit. And now all of a sudden, OpenAI is really seen, I think by the outside world anyway, at least in this particular space, as like a pretty serious front runner. And I'm just wondering, like, what does that do to the culture? Because I'll just add one more thing to that, which is, Logan, you and I sort of like met over in San Francisco at an OpenAI event when I was doing some stuff with you guys over the summer. That was super fun. And this is a sense that I got even from the leadership. They were just talking about AGI, and they were just talking, it felt like very early days of Google in a way, where it's like, we just want to make the world a better place. And that's a little bit, I'm not trying to sort of like, make it all Pollyanna, but like it does kind of, I get that sense from the outside at least. So even if that's just a front, it's a great front. But I guess like, what's the culture inside when you guys are actually front runner and you're so much smaller and you have the big people chasing you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter that much. And the rationale for that is like, at the end of the day, Google's mission is different than OpenAI's mission. Like for them to be successful with their mission, which I think is something around like connecting every person on Earth to like the world's information or something like that, it's a very different mission than the mission that OpenAI is on. Like we are trying to create a very specific thing, artificial general intelligence, make it accessible to the world and make sure that it benefits humanity. So I think that it like, in a lot of ways, again, we're in competition with Google in some very specific areas, but like in a lot of ways, like we're on a completely different path than they are. And I think maybe that changes over time, and there ends up being that feeling. I prefer the feeling of like not being in first place or what have you. Like I also don't feel that way. I think there's just like a lot of at least for me personally, I think there's just so much hype about OpenAI, and it's easy to get sucked into that. And I think the reality is like there's just so much work that still has to be done. And like I think that's the motivating thing, is to see people's excitement today and to know that like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible, and like we're still so resource constrained, and we're still so bottlenecked by compute and all these and like human hours to do work. So I think that's what continues to inspire me, is to think about what we're going to be able to do the next 12 months as we scale up and get more folks on board.
Thanks for joining us for the conversation today. Make sure to go to the AI Applied podcast to get the rest of this interview. It is 55 minutes long, jam-packed with incredible insights, and goes into some absolutely amazing topics, what AI and OpenAI is planning on doing in the future, and all sorts of really exciting stuff. So make sure to go to the AI Applied podcast if you want to listen to this full interview, which I highly recommend you do.